With the late Alan Rickman.
I did work with Alan. Dogma, you know, Kevin tells an awesome story, and again, from my perspective, it doesn't seem as funny and all that. Kevin tells it great, but I'll tell this story, but it isn't as good. But Dogma, when we did Dogma, when Kevin told me, when he got Alan Rickman signed on to do the movie, I was in bad shape and I was getting sober, like right before the movies. Kevin would be like, hey man, you gotta get sober because you have to get insured just in case everyone has to get insured if they're working a lot of days, because if something happens, they have to be able to insure those days and stuff like that. Because it's something like, I mean, I don't know, each movie of course is different, but it's something crazy like $200,000 a day to shoot a movie. So I'd always have to get insured, so I'd have to get sober. And I remember Ken was like, look man, you gotta get sober, you gotta do this because you can't mess around, dude. We have Alan Rickman. He's British, bro, and they invented acting. Seriously, and I said, what do you mean, bro? And he's like, seriously, man, you can't be sitting there joking and forgetting dialogue and sneaky bitch. And all this stuff, and he got me really nervous, and so I winded up. He's like, "You got to memorize your dialogue for your character." So I wind up reading, because I was getting sober and I wasn't allowed to leave. When Kevin would get me sober before these movies, the deal was like, if you want to do the movie, you want to work, you have to hang out with me, and you can't leave my side. So I literally would have to go with Kevin everywhere. Like even if he's like, I'm going to the grocery store, he'd be like, come on. And I'd be like, dude, I'm tired. I just want to lay around the house. He'd be like, nope, because he didn't want to trust me alone. So anyway, they were interesting times each time. Not every movie, but almost. There was 2 or 3 movies I had to do that with them. Anyway. So, I had a lot of downtime is my point, because I'd be sitting around while he'd be doing meetings at the office of production, like budgets and looking at wardrobe and all this stuff. So I wind up reading the script, and I remember we had rehearsals like 2 weeks before we started shooting, and so he, in the hotel room, in the living room area, he'd have everyone come over, Jason Lee and Ben and different people. And so he says what he remembers, and again, I sort of remember it, but it was from my perspective, but is Jason Lee, we were waiting on him, and it was me, Kevin, and Ben, and we were reading dialogue, and then he's like, all right, can you read Jason Lee's part? And I was like, oh, I'll do it. And he's like, well, do you have your script? And I was like, yeah, I don't need it. He's like, what are you talking about? I'm like, look, I have my character. He's like, you have your lines memorized? I'm like, I do. So I would read my lines, and I didn't need the script. And then it got to Jason, and I read his lines. And then he's like, wait, how do you know his lines? He goes, and then he just was shocked. So the long story short, is Kevin scared me so much because of Alan Rickman and him inventing acting that I memorized the whole script. So I literally had almost everybody's character down memorized. So the first day we were in this diner scene, and I remember, and the funny thing is that we get there, and I'm like super nervous. I'm like, hey man, nice to meet you, Mr. Rickman. And we sat at the table and we're reading dialogue, and all of a sudden it gets to him, and he's like, line! And then I look over at Kevin, and I'm like, you motherfucker. But again, that was one time he had just got there, we were just started out and stuff. But he was amazing, honestly. He was, like Kevin said, he was an awesome actor. He knew all his stuff. But again, that just stands out to me because, again, there was the very first scene, he just happened to forget one line. And he asked, you ask the script, if you don't know your line, you're like, to the script supervisor, line. And then she'll be like, and the dog said, or whatever. And so he had done that the first one. I just remember looking at Kevin, and he looked at me and smiled, and it was a moment. It was funny, but he was such a nice guy. And after that, and Kevin tells it too, because Kevin went to London, has been to London more often, like him and the family, but every time we were out there, he would invite us over, out to dinner, and all these things. He was great. George Carlin was great. I didn't get to spend as much time with Carlin because we just did the scene with Jay and Bob, and I didn't really get to hang out with him. He intimidated me because he was really quick and witty and funny. And he sort of intimidated me because Kevin would be like, he's the best, he's the funniest. And I'd be like, well, I thought I was the funniest. But he's a lot quicker, he's a lot more clever than I am, and he had like fun. But he was very nice too. I mean, honestly, everyone I've got to work with, I really feel, I just feel lucky, and it's like surreal to me. Like we did Clerks, Kevin was like, here, I wrote a movie and I put you in it. And I was like, yeah, sure. I really thought when Kevin said we were gonna shoot Clerks that I saw some dude walking around with one too, and I don't know if it was a prop, but like the big old VHS freaking, cameras that were like this big that people had, because they didn't have the little HD cameras and phones and stuff. You didn't have all that in '92. So I was like 93, and I was like, oh wow, so you're gonna borrow your mom's VHS and we're gonna shoot a movie with Jeff and Brian, this guy, and I just met Brian. But no, it was a real movie, and I got super nervous. Kevin tells I passed out a few times, like that end of that scene. I'm going on and babbling on, but sorry. But when we were doing Clerks, I was so nervous because again, when I used to be obnoxious and stuff, it was for my own entertainment. I'm gonna pull my balls out, and I'm gonna think it's funny. And I did. It wasn't for me oh, I'm gonna see if she thinks it's funny that my balls are out. I was like, I'm gonna find it funny. So I used to do all this stuff, so when it came time, Kevin was like, that shit's funny, I'm gonna write it down and see if other people find it funny. So when it was time to be like, hey, try to be funny, pull your balls out and do this for people, it made me nervous because I'm like, well, wait, I usually do this for myself now. So I had to get really drunk when we shot Clerks. And a couple times I waited around because they're like, sometimes they plan on you starting at 1, let's say, and then, things could go longer. So I drank a little too much, and at the end of Clerks, when I come in, I'm like, my grandma used to say there's one, whatever I say to Brian Holler, I'm like, I had to go home. Kevin sent me home. We had to shoot it the next day because I was so drunk. I was slurring my words, and I was like, Brian. So yeah, it was super. So I don't even know why I got into that whole story. The whole reason is because I'm saying honestly, I feel very lucky, and it's very surreal to me that, again, even now, it's nice to look out here, and this is a full room. It's pretty much full house here, and I know you guys could be out there hanging out with Barrowman and Alan Tudyk and stuff, but you guys are here to listen to me and shit talk. So I do appreciate it, and I think it's awesome. Thank you.